No, football is not 5, 6, 7 months away. Football is less than 2 weeks away. That's right, folks. The United Football League, a professional football league that's going to be on your TV screens with something to cheer for, is back in just less than 2 weeks. You got to get jacked. You got to get excited for it because football is here. March is football month. And we're continuing on with our team previews for a brand new team with a coach that you definitely know. Check out the Columbus Aviators Team Preview episode. Welcome, football fans, to another edition of the D-Gen Docs. What is up, folks? I am your host, the D-Gen Doc, and it's an UFL episode, which means I'm jacked, I'm excited, I'm ready to go because I love football, and I know you do too. No one wants to wait. Look, love the NFL, love college football. I am not trying to say, hey, let's forget about those. No, let's just continue the football good vibes. We had a great college football season. Indiana, first ever champion. Then we've had, the Seahawks, who haven't won in, so many years. We've had a great year of parity in college football in the NFL. Let's continue that fun over to the United Football League, spring football league that is absolutely electric and you need to be watching if you are a true football fan. If this is your first time joining us, thank you for checking us out here. I have a tendency to say us because I typically host a show with my co-host who makes the other D-Hen Docs, but he's actually becoming a dad and is a bit busy right now. So shout out to him, Professor Locke's there. He'll be back for the NFL and college season, but I'll be taking on the UFL here. I've been kind of running it a little bit solo past couple years anyway. Maybe not the biggest football fan, we'll question his football authority and seriousness next season. But hey, this way this is going to work is this is the 7th of 8 team preview. So if you're brand new to the UFL and you're like, dude, what is this guy talking about? I have an episode for you. Everything you need to know about the 2026 UFL. That was out, I think, almost a month ago at this point. New ownership, new teams, which one of them we're going to talk about today. New rules. I also did a 2026 playing rules breakdown because rules are changing. No more tush push. Nobody ever ran tush push in spring football, but we'll take the headlines. No more 4-point field goals. What is that? 1 foot is a catch in the UFL now. It used to be 2, kind of close to the NFL. So there's a bunch of rules that you definitely need to know if you want to be watching and enjoying this league. So definitely check that episode out. And this is team preview number 7. So that means we've done the DC Defenders. We've done the Houston Gamblers. We've done the Dallas Renegades. We've done the St. Louis Battlehawks. We have done the Birmingham Stallions. And we just did the Louisville Kings. Still waiting to say if it's a Louisville or Louisville. And now it's all about the Columbus Aviators. That is right. The Aviators of Columbus, Ohio there. This is all going to be about their coaching staff, their 2025 or 2026, roster, their championship betting odds, what threads are they going to be in, and most importantly, what is my outlook for this team for the 2026 season? Because we got new teams, we got a whole bunch of roster turnover, we got new rules, we got a whole bunch of stuff. We got to start making sense of it because football is almost back. 2 weeks away, less than 2 weeks actually by the time this comes out. So yes, the Columbus Aviators. That is the second expansion team we're going to talk about. It's Columbus, Louisville, and Orlando that have replaced Memphis, San Antonio, and the Michigan Panthers. Yes. Geez. The UFL replaced them, and suddenly they just have gone just like that in my memory. But these Columbus Aviators there, which Ohio is a football state. I mean, you got Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. You've got every which team in the different, football is meant to be played in Ohio. So I'm very happy that they brought a team to Ohio because I think that hopefully the fan base will respond. Obviously in Columbus, it's all about those Buckeyes or whatever it may be, but hopefully they got some room in their heart for these Columbus Aviators. And there's a pretty good reason for them to be interested, which we'll get to in a second. But first, I want to talk about the stadium they'll be playing in because it is the historic Cruise Stadium. This is another soccer stadium in the UFL. That's kind of been the big push by new owner Mike Rapoli. He's all about getting fan engagement and creating a true home field environment. Kind of, let's think about it as far as more of the college football esque. Why do we love college football? The pageantry, the tradition, the weird, what makes the Little Apple in Manhattan, Kansas, like, why is this a big deal? What makes Farmageddon? What makes, the Battle of the Wild and all this, like, these kind of at home atmospheres that you want to know, obviously the Rose Bowl and things like that, right? So UFL has some of that. St. Louis, the Battle Dome, filling that thing 30, 40,000, absolutely rocking. You got Audi Field, which home of the beer snake. If you don't know about the beer snake, you need to check out that episode and get yourself educated. But the whole premise is, hey, look, we're not at this point in the league going to be selling out $50,000, $60,000 stadiums. That's just not the reality. So let's get into these smaller stadiums. Let's create that more intimate, kind of passionate home field environment. And a lot of this breeds soccer stadiums because they're not as big. Also, the overhead costs are not as much as like a Ford Field, which is a lot of the reason why Michigan Panthers is no longer a franchise, even though their fans did do decently well to turn out, and they were in the UFL Championship last year. That one, I think, is the unfortunate one. The other two kind of make a lot more sense. Now, typically, for most of the team previews, I would then talk about what do they look like? What does this team look like in 2025 as far as record, their coaching staff, and the stats? You'll see that in the other 5 episodes I did where the team's already been established and it's not a new team, completely new team. So we're going to kind of just skip that segment and we're going to go right into how these folks are going to be looking on the field with their uniforms and their threads here. The official uniform picture that the USL put out. Now, obviously, this will not say Columbus on the back. It'll say the player's name. But I think these are pretty sweet, especially the blue on blue on blue with the red thrown in there. I think those jerseys are pretty damn sick. I think overall the helmets are clean, very clean. I think this is a pretty damn solid job there by the UFL with this uniform there. Let me know what you think. If you are a fan of these uniforms or not, down in the comments below. And we are going to be moving on to this betting show. So we're going to talk about the 2026 betting odds for the Columbus Aviators. A little bit of some variety across the market. Right now, only 3 books have numbers posted. DraftKings plus 750, ScoreBet plus 600, and Bet365 plus 800, 8-1 for these Columbus Aviators to take down the UFL 2026 championship. I would say this probably puts them it's a bit of variability, right? From 6 to 8-1, but I would say this is kind of the bottom 4, bottom 3. It's they're either in front of or right in front of or right behind the Orlando Storm with the Gamblers and the Louisville Kings taking up the rear there. So a lot of these newer teams are kind of in the back end there, at least projected from Vegas. And now I will say this is a tough league. UFL in general, tough to project. I think past couple seasons, Birmingham's been a little dominant, so maybe a little bit easier. But this year, especially with the expansion, the new teams, the roster turnover, I don't know how Vegas got their numbers, and I don't agree with them all. We'll talk about that in a future episode. But playoff format, as a reminder, last season and the seasons before, it was 2 conferences, XFL, USFL conference. Top 2 teams in each conference would make the playoffs. Then they would, the 2 teams would battle each other out, and then the winner of each conference would play in the championship. Now, those conferences weren't always the most balanced, so you could find some value by, hey, even if these teams are quote unquote not as good, 2 of them got to make the playoffs, and one of them is going to be playing in the championship. So if you get something like a 15 to 20 to 1 for the team playing in the championship, whether you hedge yourself out or maybe they win the damn thing, right? Now playoff format's different. It is just purely the top 4 teams in the playoffs. They seed, 1 plays 4, 2 plays 3, boom, championship game. So a lot more probably fair, equitable of a playoff format, which I am totally on board with. But we do have to be aware for the betting markets because it is a change that is worth noting. All right. This is another one where, I've talked about it before, but the home local ties are a key component for the UFL here, especially with some of the coaches. We have AJ McCarron in Birmingham, the Bama quarterback. We have head coach Chris Redmond, the Louisville quarterback, and now he's the head coach of the Louisville Kings. And now the head coach for the Columbus Aviators, Ohio's own Ted Ginn Jr., a man who really needs no introduction because he's one of the most electric football players of at least my generation. I mean, watching him, and I am the farthest thing from a Buckeyes fan, but absolutely electric player in college, and he had some damn good years in the NFL. He grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and he played high school ball there in Cleveland, actually for his father. His father was his head coach, which is always an awesome thing to do. So we'll talk about his coaching experiment stuff, but comes from a dad who was a coach, right? Maybe, I don't know if he did anything past high school level, but still valuable experience. 3 years at Ohio State, obviously a big play threat. He had 25.6 yards per reception was his average his freshman year. He also had 4 punt return touchdowns, which is a Big Ten record in 2004. He was number 9 overall draft pick. He had a 14-year NFL career. I remember doing the research for this. I'm like, damn, 14 years. This is longer than I thought. So he made himself, useful. He was not just a return guy. He had some good years with Cam Newton as a wide receiver. He put up 43 total touchdowns in his career. And then when he retired in 2021, shortly after, he became the head coach for his alma mater, Glenville High School, the coach where his dad coached at for a couple years, and now he is a UFL coach. Now, AJ McCarron, Chris Redmond, from what I could find, no prior head coaching experience. Ted Ginn Jr., he was a head coach at the high school level. How much is that going to translate? It's got to translate some, but now you're going from 18, less than 14, 18-year-old kids to grown men. How is that going to look, right? We've seen college coaches try to go to the NFL and it fail, and vice versa. Not always the same. So coming from high school and skipping college and going up, it's going to be interesting. We're going to see how that plays out here. So he does have a little bit of coaching experience, but definitely a bit green in this area. Now, it does help that his offense coordinator is Todd Haley, former USFL head coach of the Memphis Showboats and the Tampa Bay Bandits back in 2022 and then 2023. He was also a former Kansas City Chiefs head coach and a multiple-time NFL offensive coordinator. He's going to be the offensive coordinator for the Columbus Aviators, be able to help Ted Ginn Jr. out, obviously, as the senior coach on this team. And then the defensive coordinator, Captain Munnerlin. He has previous high school coaching experience, just like Ted Ginn, but this is his first real coaching debut. He was a former stud cornerback and kick returner for South Carolina. He played a little bit in the NFL. So him and Ted Ginn Jr., a little bit in the same boat, have minimal coaching experience past the high school level. This is a big step up. Let's see, let's see if they're going to thrive or if they're going to take some adjustment period to get used to things. Now, going to the quarterback room, because everybody loves talking about the quarterbacks. This is, I think, one of the not as great, probably one of the worst quarterback rooms in the UFL. Obviously, right now, everything is projection and, opinions and things like that. But that just might be mine. So let's start with the projected quarterback one and the likely guy that's going to be taking the start here. If you've watched spring football the past couple of years, Jalen McClendon is he is familiar to you. He is not a stranger. He played 6 games for the Houston not Renegades. They were the Houston Roughnecks back in the day. Now they're the Houston Gamblers, but he started 6 games for those Roughnecks. Threw for 64 pass yards, 65.3 completion percentage, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 94 rush yards, and 1 touchdown. He's a guy who's shown some flashes. He's got a big arm. He's shown some big playability, but struggles with some of the turnovers and kind of lack of consistency. Now, he did play for Houston. Houston's been a bit of a dumpster fire, even though they went 5-5 and had their best year in a while last season. So Some of it is a little bit of maybe do we take it with a grain of salt? You know, the Houston was on it's kind of a Cleveland Browns-esque type of run for all the players and not doing great things to their career. So we'll see how he is going to kind of play. But I think he's a capable quarterback, but it's not someone I'm super excited about. He's kind of been bounced around as a backup, and I think he's been a backup for a reason. Struggles with some of that consistency, whether it's hitting the throws on target or the turnovers. Jalen Morton is another quarterback in this quarterback room. He was a 4-year quarterback at Prairie View A&M, a 2-year starter. He had 4,198 pass yards, 33 touchdowns, and 22 interceptions. He also had 1,300 plus rush yards and 16 touchdowns. But he has not played a game, at least that I could see looking up, researching. He hasn't played a professional or just a regulated game since 2019. So it's been a bit. So we'll see if he, is able to, if he gets out there and we can kind of see, but a little bit of a mystery with not playing him so long. And then Aiden Sayin rounds out the room. He's a 4-year Penn, University of Penn, that is, not Penn State, UPenn starting quarterback. He has 7,157 pass yards in his college career, 45 touchdowns, 31 interceptions. He had 1 rush yard because in college, sacks count as negative rush yards. 1 rush yards over his 4 years with 4 touchdowns. Now, moving over to the key players for this team, I do think, like I touched on, that McClendon is going to be your QB1, and I think he's likely the best option. The other two are pretty unknown, but it sounds like McClendon is going to be the guy that wins that job this year. Now, moving on to the key players. So we'll go key players, any key losses, which is going to be interesting because this team didn't really exist last season. But we'll talk about a couple key losses as far as guys they drafted that aren't going to be there. And then we're going to round out with an outlook. What is my 2026 outlook for these Columbus Aviators? All right. On the offensive side of the ball, I like to do like 4 or 5 offense and then 4 or 5 defense for highlighting key players for this team, players you should know who should make an impact on the team. First up is the running back room. I'm going to talk about both these running backs. Running back Taua Te'aua, a guy who came out of virtually nowhere. He got picked up mid-season by the Michigan Panthers, and he is an absolute bowling ball. I mean, him, Tyler Algier, like, that is the same guy. They're bowling balls. They're, and it's shown. 7 games played, 356 rush yards, but 6 rush touchdowns, which is good for first in the UFL. And then his running mate this year is going to be Zaquandre White, the running back number 1 for the Houston Roughnecks last season. He played in 8 games, had 304 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 98 receiving yards behind a pretty porous and terrible Houston offensive line. He's actually pretty impressive. So I'm excited to see these 2 running backs do some work together. Definitely a little bit of thunder and lightning, with Taua being the kind of power back and White being more of the speedy back there. I don't do this often, but I'm going to highlight an offensive lineman, tackle Jawan Beshel-Beatty. He's been a key component of the St. Louis Battlehawks offensive line, which was one of the better offensive line groups in the UFL. So I think bringing a veteran presence there on the offensive line is going to help this offense orchestrate. And then at the wide receiver position, Kiki Chisholm, one of the better wide receivers in the UFL, but really more so important because of his connection with McClendon. They were both at Houston last year. He put up 31 receptions, 299 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So having that same quarterback, that continuity, I think will go a long way, especially with training camp's only about a month, and we got to start playing games. No preseason. Got to figure it out on the fly. Kicker. I told you I'm talking about every kicker because you got to know who they are. You got a 4-point field goal. The extra point now can be like a NFL extra point where you move it back to the 33-yard line and try for the 1. Ryan Coe is his name. He's a 5-year college kicker. He had 2 years at Delaware, 1 year at Cincinnati, 1 year at UNC, and 1 year at Cal. He was 62 for 83, only 74.7%, so below 75% field goal percentage, along with 54, but he was 115 out of 115 for extra points. Now, those are college extra points. They're from the 2, the 5, whatever it is, very close up. These are going to be the NFL regulations, so they're going to be back a bit more. Going over the defensive side, and this is essentially a defense that is going to kind of look like the Michigan Panthers, the team that got disbanded. It's like the Columbus Panthers. I mean, hey, most of those guys can stay up in that area, although those two states hate each other, and for good reason. But first guy I'm going to highlight, defensive end Kenny Willekes. He was a 2-year starter for the Michigan Panthers. He had 51 tackles, 11 TFL, 7.5 sacks, 1 pass deflection, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery in the past 2 seasons. A very key component for a defense that helped get them to the UFL championship. They ultimately fell short, especially in that game. They gave up a ton of points, but they were a very solid defense for most of the year. Also, a couple of his former teammates, defensive back Kendrick Whitehead, who was the UFL Special Teams Player of the Year last season. He was a 2-year starting nickelback for Michigan. He's got 89 tackles, 5 TFLs, and 6 pass deflections in the past 2 seasons. A guy who is always going to be around the ball. And then linebacker Noah Dawkins, also a 2-year starter for the Michigan Panthers. He had 88 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 4 pass deflections, 1 forced fumble, and 1 fumble recovery in the past 2 seasons. So with Whitehead and Dawkins, I mean, these are guys always going to be around the ball, nose for the football, and, trying to create havoc and create plays. And then finally, defensive back Smoke Monday. This is a guy who's got some hype coming in. He was a 4-year player at Auburn. 2 years was he a starter back in the 2020, 2021, 2019 season. He had 170 tackles, 8 pass deflections, 6 sacks, 5 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, and 3 defensive touchdowns. So, whether it's a scoop and score or a pick six, this guy knows what to do with the ball when it's in his hands. So someone who has got a lot of hype coming into the UFL for his first season. Now going over to the losses. Again, this category is going to look a little bit different than a lot of the other shows where you actually have an established team. And now how is this going to look different? Because who did we lose? They weren't a team last year. So who did they lose? I'll just talk about a couple guys that, UFL, they have a draft, they have a free agency period where they draft guys, but guys don't always have to report to training camp, kind of just like the NFL, but happens a lot more so because if that guy gets an NFL contract or he just doesn't want to play in the UFL or wants to retire or whatever he wants to do. So only 74% of the players who drafted showed up as of February 22nd, which is the best data I have. One of those guys, Clayton Tune, who was supposed to be, we saw him a little bit for the Packers when both Jordan Love and Malik Willis went down in that game against the Ravens, I believe. It was a pretty pivotal game, actually, for both of them. But Clayton Tune, he got an NFL contract, I think, with the Packers, but at least for somebody. So he is not going to be playing. And he was someone who him and McClendon were supposed to be vying for that top spot. Some defensive ends in Nelson Caesar, Chris Bogle, Isaiah Thomas, and Amar Barno, all not reporting. Wide receiver Amari Rogers, who had kind of bounced around the UFL a little bit, and running back Rasheem Blackshear. None of those guys are going to be there. Again, I mean, they were just kind of like drafted. They were, the coaching staff probably expected them to be there, but it's not like the team was used to how that was run or they were there all last season or anything like that. So moving on to the outlook portion. So we're going to talk about our biggest question marks for this team and then give my 2026 outlook for this Columbus Aviators team. I think that this offensive line group is projected to be a very solid group. If you've heard me talk at all every time over the past 4 or 3 years since I've been doing this, offensive line is the lifeline of an offense. As a New York Giants fan, I can tell you, if you don't have an offensive line, you don't have anything, right? You can say the same about the defensive line too, because, shout out guys like Michael Strahan, O.C. Umenyiora, and Justin Tuck and all them for getting us 2 Super Bowls against Tom Brady. But the trenches is where the game of football is won and lost. And this projects to be a pretty damn solid offensive line group. You've got offensive tackle Ryan Nelson coming over from Michigan. I talked about Bushel Beatty coming over from St. Louis. You got guard Aaron Monteiro coming over from San Antonio, and then Matt Forniak coming over from DC. So just a good amount of guys who have played in the UFL, have been starting caliber guys. So projects out to be decently well that they can kind of maintain that starter status and be a productive unit. Next question, can the former high school coaches, both Ted Ginn Jr. and let me not butcher the name there, Captain Munnerlin, both the head coach and the DC, can their coaching translate to the UFL? Are they going to be able to, go from coaching high school kids to now professionals who are trying to get back into the league? I will say having the veteran Todd Haley on the staff, who's been a coach at the NFL level, at the spring football level, I think that will obviously be a help for both Ginn Jr. and Munnerlyn there. And then can this Columbus/Michigan Panthers defense pick up where they left off? I alluded to it, but the Michigan Panthers, they were a group that created a ton of pressure. They created a lot of turnovers. They were an aggressive defensive group, one of the better in the league. They've got Columbus has a lot of guys from Michigan. Can they all gel appropriately and make this new system work? Now, my outlook for this team, I think they're a little bit undervalued. I think they're going to be closer to a middle of a pack as opposed to a bottom tier team. I think their running back room and their offensive line will keep them in a lot of games. I like this offensive line. I like Zaquandre Wright and Toa Tawaioa. Those are two good backs who can get some things going on the ground. Now, Todd Haley has to be able to lean on that run game. I think in times he's gotten a little pass happy in the past. But I think this is a pretty underwhelming quarterback and wide receiver room. I alluded to it up top. Is not my favorite quarterback room by any stretch of the imagination. I think wide receivers, Kiki Chisholm is good, but I think outside of him, there's not a lot of meat on the bone there. So I think their pass offense is going to struggle. So I think they're going to need to get things going on the ground. I do think they do have talent on the defense, but it's going to come up to coaching. How does that DC, who's a first-time defensive coordinator, go ahead and coach these guys up? I think that coaching inexperience and their pass game struggles ultimately kind of keep them out of the playoffs. But I do think they're going to be, right there kind of going forward at that fifth, sixth spot there, where I don't think they're a bottom feeder team, but I'm not quite calling them a championship caliber team either. I think they'll be fighting for a playoff spot that they'll eventually wind up missing and go kind of something close to 5-5 is my projection. All right. What is next, folks? Well, I just did, this was the 7th out of 18 previews. There's 8 teams. So it sounds like I owe you one more team preview, which, yes, I will be coming out on the Orlando Storm. That's going to finish out our UFL Team Previews series. Then I'm going to put out one episode, before the season talking about what my power rankings for this teams and a kind of general overview of everything I talked about in the 18 previews, just a little snapshot of each. And then the 2 future bets that I've placed that I would recommend that you place as well before the season kicks off. Now, what this show is going to look like, what it's looked like the past 2 years is every week I will break down all 4 of the games, talking injuries, talking matchups, talking analysis. And then I will talk bets. I will say what bets I'm making, what my favorite bets are. Now, the first couple of years, it's been video format has been all about spreads, money line, totals, because that's the information we have. First year, there was no props. Second, it was just fantasy projections, underdog, things like that. Second year, there were props, but they weren't coming out until like 12 hours before kickoff. And that's not enough time for me to produce a video and get it out there for y'all to see. So I would put out the video and then I would put out my prop plays for the week over on Twitter, or X, that is. So, another reason to follow me at the DGen Doc there. But this season, if the lines are out soon enough, I will absolutely include the props on the show. I would prefer that because I like betting my props early and getting the value out there, but we will see, because the UFL is a little bit of a wild, wild west. You never really know what you're going to get, which is why I think it's a fun league you should get into. And it's got legends, you got AJ McCarron coaching off against Ted Ginn Jr., against Chris Redman, against, just Anthony Becht and all these other former players. But I think it is a very, very fun league that has high level football. But you know what they say, folks. A lock a day keeps a bookie away. And here at the DGen Docs, we've got your prescription. From Doc here on DFSG Plus. I'm out of here.